In this video, we're going to be talking about my Honda SS250. It has an engine from a KXF250 motocross bike with 40 brake horsepower at the back wheel, and it does 110 miles an hour. This is the bike I wanted when I was 16, not my old Honda SS50 that did 40 on a good day. This bike is quite different from my normal bikes that I make. The engine is stock. I didn't modify it at all, well, apart from maybe painting the cam cover and changing the water pump housing so I could get the radiator to fit. The engine may be stock, but the frame is far from. I had to do so much re-engineering to make it all go together and look like a factory bike. I had to cut the spine frame apart and plate the inside around structural key areas. The rear swinging arm has been made from 3.2mm thick cold drawn steel to take the force and the torque from the engine pulling the back wheel. Here's the new swinging arm fitted to the frame during one of the dry builds. It's 60mm longer than the standard SS50 swinging arm. This was to help stop the wheelies. The rear shocks are made by Hagen's, especially for this bike. I made the exhaust system from 1.5mm thick 304 stainless so that it would be strong and not split. And the internal baffling was quite hard to get the noise down, but I got it to an acceptable level. The front pipe is welded up from sections of pre-bent pipe that I buy on eBay. Because the engine was so visually different from an SS50, I decided to keep the original dual seat, tank, white stripes and sticker that Honda fitted in the factory to keep us safe back in the day. The throttle's quick action, only a quarter of a turn to full bore, and it's off a motocross bike, which goes perfectly with the engine. The speedo's from an early Honda 250, and I incorporated an LCD water temperature gauge into the dial, and the rev counter's by Cosso and goes to 14,000 RPM. To make my water temperature gauge, I bought a 12-volt digital gauge off of eBay, took it apart, removed all the guts, and then put them into my standard Honda speedo, like this, cutting the dial out to fit. I tested it with a cup of hot water, adding water and watching the temperature go up. It works perfect. I upgraded the front brake by fitting a disc from an SS50 5-speed. These are actually quite large for the day, and once I'd fitted a new caliper from a Kawasaki KXF250 with my special bracket and then drilled the disc out on my rotary table, it's amazing. One finger from 50 miles an hour and it stops on a sixpence. I respoked the wheels with heavy-duty, slightly wider rims and heavy-duty Hagen spokes. The spokes are nearly twice the diameter of the standard SS50 spokes, and I fit slightly oversized Continental Conti Force tyres to cope with the extra braking force. The forks may look standard on the outside, but inside I've got slightly larger stanchions, heavy duty springs and different damping internals, and it handles great. I had to bore out the bottom yokes to accept the bigger forks, but externally it all looks stock. Making the radiator was quite tricky because it has to be big enough to cool the engine but small enough to look good on an SS50. So I solved this by getting a dual core centre, making my own bottom tank and my own top tank to suit the bike. The KXF250 engine was from a motocross bike, so it didn't have a thermostat, so this was going to cause me a problem, so I had to make a housing to fit a thermostat from a Honda Fireblade. With all this power from the engine, I needed to get the fuel out of the tank quicker than the standard SS50 tap would allow, so I fitted a tap from a 250 Honda with a 6mm outlet pipe that flows through the frame into the carburetor. The carburetor sits behind the frame and is connected to the engine by a ram tube that's nearly a foot long. It's quite amazing really. My Dodge Viper has ram tube induction. Apparently it gives you more torque. The carburetor is a Keeling CR flat slide with accelerator pump and a special little knob you pull out for cold starting. It's like a choke, but it's not a choke. It also has a throttle position sensor connected to the ECU. The air filter's seen better days, but works great. The Kawasaki KXF250 engine usually comes with a little plastic cover that covers the gearbox sprocket. This would look totally wrong on my SS50. So I got a Honda C50 cover, cut off the front bit that normally covers over the magneto, worded on a piece of plate and put it back on. And now it has a sort of Honda feel to it now. And when I made the chain guard, it all fits nicely together. The rear wheel is from a Honda 125 with an upgraded cush drive, upgraded spokes and a wider rim. And I fitted one of those Continental Conti Force tyres as well, which is just perfect for this bike. With all the extra power on tap, I had to upgrade the rear chain from a 420 to a 520, and I made a 28 tooth aluminium rear sprocket. In May 2015, I tested the top speed of my Honda SS250 at Elvington Runway in Yorkshire. It did 94 miles an hour in fifth, but it was lacking power. The engine was wheezing and coughing. I think it was down to my ram tube induction and my exhaust not being matched. So I took it to my local dyno shop and they gave it an extra 7 bhp, so I'm sure it'll go faster now. And it actually pulled 98 miles an hour in fourth on the dyno. Because this is a race engine, I need to check the valve clearances quite regularly. This involves removing the rocker cover. Before I can take the rocker cover off, the long spark plug cap has to be pulled out of its tunnel. Then I loosen the 2 screws with an Allen key. It's a bit fiddly, but I've left just enough clearance to get my fingers in there and to be able to get the rocker cover off. With the rocker cover removed, you can now see the 2 camshafts that are driven by a Hyvo chain. I now use the kickstart lever to position the engine so both the inlet valves are fully closed. I need 2 feeler gauges to do the valve clearances, a 6th valve for the inlets and a 8th valve for the exhausts. I check the inlet valves with my 6th valve feeler gauge and it slides in lovely, so there's no adjustment required this time. I turn the engine over again with a kickstart to position the exhaust valves fully closed and then check with my 8th valve feeler gauge, and that also slides in nicely, so there's no adjustment required this time. With the 4 valve clearances checked, I replace the rocker cover back onto the engine. Then replace the 2 screws and tighten with the Allen key. The last thing to do is to replace the spark plug cap. With all the maintenance done, it's time to take it for a little spin. So I need some groceries, so I'll take the SS250. It's a bit loud to rev up at home, so I stopped on the way to the shops. And here's Karl Fogarty riding my SS250 inside Alexandria Place at a recent motorcycle news show. It was so quick. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I had great fun making it. The little SS250 is a hoot to ride. The only problem is it makes you ride like a hooligan. If only I was 16 again and had this bike, I would have been the fastest in the pack.